Well, for good or ill, here I go. I've been wanting to put this particular story down on a video. I've only written it down once, and I've never really talked about it to anybody until 20 years ago. But that's part of a different story. I must say, full disclosure here, I have ME, and a major part of my particular ME is brain fog. So it's difficult for me to focus on things for too long, so I may wander often, but hopefully I'll come back on point. It's a story that's actually 50 years in the making and has a couple of incredible coincidences and a big dark patch, but a lot of good stuff too. A lot of stories, and I want to put them down on video before my body finally gives up, so that my son has a record of crazy stuff like this. This story starts in 1965, and I was 10 years old at that time, born in 55. My favorite programs as a 10-year-old were Doctor Who, which was pretty new and very scary, Stingray with Captain Troy Tempest, and Space Patrol, and what was it now? Oh, there was Fireball XL5, and with Robbie the Robot, and then Thunderbirds at a later date. And my favorite was Stingray with Captain Troy Tempest. I don't know whether it was because it was underwater or whatever, but anyway, you'd have to Google it to understand just how cool these puppets were. Little did I know at that time that having that as one of my favorite programs, or rather a character in that series, would actually save my life. Literally, with the help of somebody else. But that was the start, or this is the start, of a 50-year story. 10 years old, it was the winter holidays, Christmas holidays leading up to Christmas, which was never a good guy next door just hawking up. Christmas was never a good time, really. It wasn't a happy time. We didn't have any money, and if I got a box of chocolates and an orange, or a couple of bits of fruit, that was about it. I got a toy trumpet one year, but yeah, so it wasn't the best of time. The Christmas, and it's funny because to this day I still hate Christmas. I'm sorry, this is the kind of brain fog moment. Bang, everything just goes. Christmas, incredibly cold. I've never really had friends. I don't know why. I've always been a friendly kind of person, but I've never wanted to get close to anybody. I don't know whether that's because of the stuff that happened in my childhood. I had a very physically abusive father who beat the shit out of me for any reason at all, and for no reason at all. He also beat the crap out of my mum. So yeah, trigger warning. I suppose I have to do that these days. That the story would include describing physical violence, I suppose. Christmas holidays by myself. I'd made friends with the local rag and bone man. Because he went down our back lane. This was in the days of Steptoe and Son. Literally, I don't know if anybody's old enough to know that. You might have to Google that too. A horse and a cart was our Scrappy, and he would come round. And this one time, he had a bicycle frame on it, nothing on it, just an empty bike frame. And I asked him, because I didn't have a bike, I asked him if he would give it to me, if I could have it. And he said, he looked at me and he said, if you come and see me later today and spend an hour of your time, well, basically just come and see me behind St. Mark's Church, and you can do some work for me and I'll give it to you. I mean, these days the horror would be, what? No, you don't go. Of course I went. And turned up there and he says, all right, son. I've lost my Geordie accent, so I'm not even going to try and put it on. Oh yeah, I should mention, this is all happening in Sunderland in the northeast of England. And winters were very cold then. So yeah, went to the Scrappy. He said, you see all that down there? I need that swept, and there was a pile of like bits of broken metal and things. Looked to be from a big machine. If you can move that over to that place, I'll give you the bike frame. So I did that. He gave me a brush. I swept up and spent about an hour just moving all this over to the other side. Didn't finish it. I was knackered, and he could see I was knackered. So he said, that's enough. He says, yeah, you can have the bike frame. And I asked him if I could leave it there because I've got nowhere else to put it, because I knew my dad wouldn't allow me to make a bike or have a bike, to do something myself. They said, yeah. And every weekend I would nip down and do some cleaning or move some stuff for him, and sit with his dog. He had a lovely dog called Lassie, of course, and it wasn't a sheepdog, a collie, but anyway. And he would, if there were any bicycle bits there that I saw, he would let me have them as long as I did some work. And it took a while, but yeah, I got a basic bike together. There were derailleur gears, I think, at that time, but I ended up with the Sturmey Archer, which just had 3 gears. It was in the hub on the back wheel. So I just took the back wheel and that was my gears. And I had really old-fashioned straight handlebars. Well, that was okay. And I got a bike together. He even cleaned up a rusty chain that came in on one bike. He'd soaked it in a bath for me, an oil bath, and helped me put it on. And yeah, it was a big day when it was finished, and I rode it out. And he got on with a thumbs up and that. He says, you can still come and clean, And I did. I think I went back a few more times and just sat with his dog and talked about stuff. It was just, completely innocent, just a really nice guy, lonely old guy that had nothing basically, apart from his dog. So I think he liked the company as well. So I ended up with a bicycle, but I knew that I couldn't let my dad have it, see it, because he just wouldn't allow me to have it. Or we had a policeman, Mr. Turner, I think his name was, who lived a couple of doors down. This is in Chester Street, Millfield, Sunderland. And I went and asked him if I could leave my bike at the front of his house. He had a wall. There was just a couple of feet. It wasn't really a garden. It was just a garden wall, 2 feet in front of the bay window, And if I could leave it, outside his window, because if my dad thought it was mine, he'd smash it, take it off me. And he didn't believe me, but yeah, I kept it there. And there was this one Saturday, here we go, back to live, Saturday lunchtime. Bitterly cold winter. There wasn't any snow. And for some reason, I decided that a trip to the beach would be a good idea. And I went to see if my mate at the time, only had one friend really, and he wasn't like, close friend, but because of the bike, he had a bike, and we hang out a little bit after school, and stuff like that. Nigel Brummel, who lived near Hilton Road, and he didn't want to come out, it was too cold, he said. So anyway, I just rode down Hilton Road all the way down through the town to Roker Beach, which was about, I don't know, maybe 5 miles, 4 or 5 miles, not a huge distance. And got there in the afternoon to Roker Pier, and at the side of Roker Pier there used to be a little wooden jetty that at high tide, normal high tide, the jetty would be about level with the water or a few inches above it, type thing, and but deep enough for guys to go fishing. And as I climbed down the rocks onto the beach near Roker Pier, there was nobody there. And sorry about that dog, I'm hoping it's going to stop yapping. There was nobody there. It was a cold winter's day. It must have been a weekend day, probably a Saturday afternoon. And I walked down to the wooden jetty, and it was high tide-ish. And there was just one guy who was fishing about halfway down the jetty, so maybe 100 meters out, maybe. No, not as far as that, maybe 50 meters out from the actual beach. And he was there with his daughter, who was about my size or my age-ish. And he was fishing. And I collected a handful of little stones, little pebbles, and intending to throw them at seagulls at the end of the wooden jetty. I don't know where that came from. But anyway, I walked down the jetty, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to walk past this guy. I can't throw stones in the water where he's fishing. He's going to get upset because I'll scare all the fish and things. So I walked past him, maybe another, I don't know, memory, maybe another 25, 30 meters past him, something like that. And started, the water, it was years later I figured out the water was about 20 feet deep at the point where I was, something like that, give or take. And I started throwing stones at the seagulls. There were always seagulls in Seaburn and Roker, Sunderland, anywhere near the coast. There's millions of seagulls. And I nearly hit one, and that sort of upset me because that wasn't the point, really. I don't know. Anyway, so I decided to stop that. And the couple of stones I had left, I chucked in the sea. And as I chucked them in, there was a piece of flotsam, a piece of wood that looked like a staff type thing, a walking stick that was floating. And I bent down, pick it up, yeah, fell in. The cold, oof. It was like ice, and it was like a bite. It was like being bitten really quickly all the way as I actually went in the water. And I think it was more an instinctive thing. I didn't deliberately take a breath, but I must have taken a breath with the shock of the water, I don't know. But I fell in and started sinking. I was upright, literally standing like a statue with my arms down by my side, sinking upright. And then as I'm going down, oh God, I can still feel tickling of the air bubbles, the little air bubbles caught in my socks or my clothes or whatever, running up my skin, like tickling up my skin, tiny little air bubbles, hundreds and hundreds of them, just running up my body and then coming out and running up my face. And there was just like a stream of little air bubbles that would just come up all over my body as I was going down. And it seemed like, I mean, obviously it's not the case, but it seemed like there were like two levels, you know, where it was fairly light up here in the water, my eyes were open, and then all of a sudden it sort of got a bit darker. Not dark, but noticeably darker. And I ended up standing on the seabed, upright, knowing that I was going to die. This is how I was going to die. I couldn't swim. And I wanted to cry, but I knew I couldn't, because if I did, obviously the air would come out and I'd die quicker. And I worried about my bike, and then felt incredibly sad because my mum would be sad. She'd miss me. Probably the only person who would. But I knew that I couldn't cry, and I didn't know what to do. I knew that eventually I was going to have to let the air out because it was already starting to hurt, holding my breath for this long. And wishing I could swim, but I didn't know what to do. And then, out of nowhere, a vision, a vision of beauty. Shit. I'll not use vision. A little movie of Aquamarina. All right, well, it's been a long time since I've been this deep in this, but it was such a key part in my life. This whole situation played such a key part. Like I say, it's a story of 50 years. So all this vision, Aquamarina, who was a puppet, like Thunderbird's type puppet with strings and everything, who was secretly in love with Troy Tempest, who was the captain of Stingray. That was like an international rescue thing, but he was the water one. And she could live on land and breathe air, but she lived in the sea. She was a sea lady, but she had legs, so she wasn't a mermaid. She could live underwater. And this picture of Aquamarina just swimming from left to right with the straight legs, you know, with the strings from the puppets, just straight legs going across the screen like that as she's swimming underwater. And I thought, well, maybe I can do that. I knew that I had a jacket, donkey jacket we used to call them. It was the thickest jacket I had. I only had two, I think, two or three, but it was a horribly ugly donkey jacket, like a workman's jacket for a kid. And it was really heavy, thick material. And so I knew I couldn't swim up with that. So I let that, I must have undone the buttons at some point, obviously, because I let it slide off me. And that released a load of other air bubbles that ran up my skin and up the back of my neck and up my face. Yeah. And I knew that it had gone. I feel it just go past my hands. And then I slowly bent my legs and hunkered down. And even now I can still feel the cold water moving up my face as I'm going down. It had a weight to it, you know. It's physical, obviously. And I hunkered down, and then I just pushed off as hard as I could and started kicking my legs. And I did start moving. That made me happy. But I was still worried because I didn't know how much longer I could hold my breath. And it was really starting to hurt. And I got past that point where the dark and the light bit was, and came up to the light a bit and said, I'm nearly there, nearly there, nearly there. But I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it. And after all that trying, and started kicking quicker, and I started wiggling my hands like a fin on a fish was the idea. And yeah, I started moving a bit quicker, but it still wasn't quick enough. And I knew I couldn't let my air out, because if I did that, I would have to breathe in all the seawater and that would go in my lungs and kill me. So I thought, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to drink it. And I started taking in mouthfuls of water and drinking it, trying to sort of distract me from, letting my air out. I don't know how many mouthfuls I took, but I knew I wasn't going to make it. Kept kicking, and then I could feel blackness sort of, on the outside, and just slowly coming in and coming in and coming in. And the next thing is I feel a thump on my head. I'd come up under a part of the jetty, and that was when I lost it. And I let a lot of air out, but I managed not to breathe in. And started panicking, basically, for the first time, surprisingly. And I think I was just about to black out. Not quite, but pretty close to it. And then I felt my hair being pulled to the side and starting to move. My whole body was being pulled to the side. And it was obvious the fisherman had seen me fall in and run up. I don't know how long I was down there. Like I said, it was 20 foot. It probably wasn't that long in real time, but it feels like fucking hours when you think it through. And I was yanked out of the water by my hair and my arm, and stared straight into the face of this guy, and immediately puked up all the seawater all over him that I'd swallowed. And he pulled me close and hugged me. And his daughter behind him said, is he dead, Dad? And he just said, no. All right. And I think I was in some kind of shock. I was just completely emotionless. Yeah. He did the most amazing thing in the middle of winter. Ice cold, bitter winds. And I'd been in the North Sea. He stripped me completely naked and started wringing out all my clothes and putting them back on me. And the only thing that sticks in my memory from that is me being a bit embarrassed because his daughter was about my age and she'd see my willy. Wow. Yeah, he wrung out all my clothes, helped me put them back on. I was shaking. He unbuttoned, he had it wasn't denim, I can't remember what it was, corduroy maybe. A jacket, big thick jacket. And he unbuttoned it, pulled me in, and hugged me, and like pulled the jacket around me. And warmed me up a little bit. And after a couple of minutes, he said, get yourself warm, lad. I never said thank you to him. I never thanked that guy for saving my life. I wonder if his daughter's still alive. She'd be my age. Born around 1955. Never thanked him. Got on my bike and shaking, of course. My clothes were still wet. Well, not wet, certainly damp, and wind chill and everything else. God knows how cold it was, and I didn't have a jacket, which would have been wet anyway. But I had a plan for that. As soon as I got home, as soon as I got through the front door, I'd open my bedroom door, which is near the front door in the hallway, open it for a second and then close it again, and just tell them I'd thrown my jacket in the room. That was my plan, as I was shaking and riding my bike. It was starting to get dark, so it would have been about 4:30-ish, something like that in the afternoon. Maybe a little bit later. And I got to Roker Avenue, and they were still building the new villages in the sky, this amazing concept of building tower blocks is what they ended up being, not villages in the sky. But they were in the process of coming from the beach on the right-hand side, and there's the really old, I can't remember the name of St. Peter's Church on the left, but they were building tower blocks, and they weren't finished by any means, maybe 50% built. And on the other side of the road was like a little hut with a brazier, a typical oil drum brazier out the front of it. This is for the night watchman, who is the security for the whole area opposite him on the main road, which is obviously quiet. There wasn't a lot of traffic around in those days. So I stopped and told him what had happened. And I'm shaking, obviously, you can see that. And he just looked at me in total horror and said, get yourself in here, lad, and sit down. Son, he said, not lad. Excuse me. Sorry. Get yourself in here. And for the second time, within a couple of hours, I was naked again, completely naked. He said, get all your clothes off and he, one by one, oh no, he had it wasn't a chair, it must have been like a stool or something. And I think it was my trousers he put on there anyway. And he held my clothes next to the brazier, one by one, until they were dry. Imagine that. 10-year-old boy, naked, in a watchman's tent. And he had a jumper or a cardigan. And he put that around my shoulders and told me to move up close to the brazier. It was hot. I stopped shaking quite quickly. I don't know how long I was there, but when my clothes were dry, he sent me on my way. Can you imagine that? Incredible, isn't it? Incredible. I thanked him and told him that he probably stopped me from getting a real beating from my dad by helping me. Thanked him. Got on my bike, and as I say, it was getting dark now. Rode as quickly as I could and got as far as St. Mark's Church, which was maybe half a mile away from home on Hilton Road. And it was like this voice from God just said, "You stop." So I looked around, and this was the early days of panda cars, which is what we used to call them, police cars. And they were panda cars because they had a white stripe, and this one had a loudspeaker on the roof, and the policeman inside had told me to stop. I stopped, and he got out, came up to me, and he says, "You got no lights on that bike. You can't ride out here with no lights on that bike." He probably looked at it and thought, it's a bit of everything, you know. It's obviously a homemade thing. Probably wasn't even safe. It was actually, but that's what he might have thought. And he was really strong about it and lectured me. I'm still in fucking shock, you know. And here he is lecturing me about no lights on my bike. And then he finished off with saying, "Now get up on there on the pavement, push it." For some reason, I took that phrase, push it, as, you know, push off, get going, go away. So bike was on the pavement. I hopped on my bike and started riding my bike on the pavement and heard the voice from God again, except it was pretty obvious that God was really pissed off with me. And so I stopped. What have I done? And he slapped me. He walked up to me and slapped me. Fuck. After everything I'd just been through, he fucking slapped me. It was quite hard as well. And he said, I tried hard not to cry. I think I just about hung on to it. I don't think I cried, but I must have been pretty damn close. He said, "I told you to push it." And I tried to explain, you know, I thought you meant push off. Push it. And then walked away. So the last half mile or so, I sort of half ran and half walked. Yeah, the word jogging hadn't been invented then. I jogged, pushing my bike. And he stayed with me as I turned round to go off the main road onto a side road and then up to Chester Street. He stayed with me all the way, bastard. And pushed it. And he didn't come up Chester Street. He left me at the bottom. And I pushed it up Chester Street and then pushed it into Mr. Turner, our local policeman's front garden. Went in the house, and I knew I was late. I was supposed to be there late as 5 o'clock, and it's for tea at 5 o'clock, which was normally something like beans and sausage, or beans and egg, or beans or something, fish fingers, kind of stuff. And I knew I was late. It was after 5 o'clock by the time I got there. I remembered to open my bedroom doors. I got in and closed the front door. I opened and closed my bedroom door, and then heard my mum say, "Alan, is that you?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You're late." But it was the way that she said it that sort of told me, oh, fuck, he's there. Oh, butterflies. Shit. Walked into the front room, and he was standing at the door of the kitchen on the other side of the front room. And he said, "You're late." I said, "Yeah. Nigel got lies, just Nigel got a puncture and we had to walk home from the park." He said, my father, "Have you been to Roker? Have you been to the beach?" The bottom fell out of my world. I thought, how the hell would he know that? How would he know that? Out of all the places, how would he know that? But he obviously did. But I couldn't say yes because I wasn't allowed to go there by myself or anywhere near it. And I knew that if I'd said yes, he's going to beat the shit out of me, so I've got nothing to lose. So I said, no. And he said, "Give me your shoe." Pointed down at my shoe. They were sort of like slip-on shoes. They were actually my school shoes, but they were the only pair that I had. And I thought, oh shit, he's going to hit me with my own shoe. For what? He doesn't know for sure. How can he know? And as I took it off and gave it to him, he came right up into my face and just said, "Salt burns with a blue flame." And I thought, what's he on about? Turned around, walked into the kitchen, turned the cooker on. The shoe was about a meter away from it, and the whole kitchen just lit up bright blue. Well, slight exaggeration. I didn't know what was going on and why this was proof that I'd been to the beach, but it obviously was. Now I know what it was. It's the sodium burning. He was a clever bastard, my dad. He was a clever bastard, more of a bastard than being clever. But so he knew that I'd been to the beach and that I'd lied to him. And so for the second time that day, I was picked up by my hair. Except this time it was to pull my head forward onto a full-on punch from him. It almost broke my jaw, and I still have problems now with it. It semi-dislocates when I open my mouth too far. I was knocked out. As he punched me, he then threw my head backwards, and I was knocked out. Next thing I remembered was my mum's face. I woke up, my head was in her lap, and she was looking down at me, and she saw that I was awake, and she said, "It's okay, son, he's gone." And then I noticed all the redness on the side of her face, where he'd obviously, after he'd knocked me out, maybe Mum tried to get in between us or something, or stop him from doing more, and he's taken out on her as well. It was my intention on my way back home on the bike to ask my dad to teach me how to swim. I hated him, but he knew how to do a lot of stuff, and I knew he could swim. Obviously, I never got to ask him that. But I did end up a swimmer. But that's a story for the next part. So this is how the string puppet called Aquamarina from the 60s program Stingray saved my life, with more than a little help from an incredibly amazing guy who pulled me out of the water. It was him that saved my life, but Aquamarina got me up there. Aquamarina and Robbie the Robot from Fireball XL5 will feature in the back end of this 50-year long story. So part 2 will be up very, very soon, which is where it all starts going right and horribly wrong at the same time. Thank you for staying with me and listening to this. It was unscripted. And it is the first time really that I've talked about it in depth. It was a major turning point in my life, and part 2 will bring light to that sentence. Thank you. Join me again for part 2. Wow. Did I do it?